evening. Welcome to the April 10th, 2024 meeting of the Wilmington School Committee. All members are in attendance with the exception of our student representative, Ms. Benoit. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before moving on to the next item on our agenda, we wanted to acknowledge the tremendous shock that the community of Wilmington and Wilmington High School experienced this past weekend with the tragic passing away of Kevin Stano. And I would ask that all members present in this room and those watching at home to observe a moment of silence with the committee as we honor him. Bow their heads. Thank you. The school committee offers its deepest condolences to the Stano family and the high school community, to all of their friends and all who knew them. The next item is our student representative report from the middle school, and our representatives tonight are Sarah Najarian and Jen Corby. And if you could come forward to the table. Thank you very much for coming.
So to start with some of the middle school academics, it's hard to believe, but the fourth quarter is already underway. Quarter 3 reports will come out this Friday. Students in all grades have taken the MCAS in ELA and will begin the Math MCAS after April vacation. This year, our 8th graders will additionally be taking Science MCAS and the first of the civics exams. Good luck to all of them.
In PE, what an exciting finish to PE's annual March Madness tournaments. Students competed in their 3v3 model, and it came down to some critical key plays. Thanks to our PE teachers, Ms. Simpson and Ms. Livermore, who continue to make this event a student favorite. Students are now honing their floor hockey skills and looking forward to soccer after the April break.
With GSA, the GSA will be sponsoring a Day of Silence on Friday, April 12th. The Day of Silence is a national student-led demonstration where the LGBTQIA+ students and allies all around the country and the world take a vow of silence to protest the harmful effects of harassment and discrimination of the LGBTQIA+ people and students. It was started in the mid-1900s by 2 college students, and today the Day of Silence has expanded the reach to reach hundreds and thousands of students.
Advisory. Students will be continuing panorama lessons as well as completing the panorama surveys in advisory this month. They will also continue to work on their MARC lessons, which in conjunction continue to promote positive student success in our building.
To add on to the advisory, in conjunction with the Student Council, students have begun the fun event of door decorating. This year, door decorating has taken place in the spring. This will give everyone an opportunity to change it up. Student Council members kicked off their event by decorating the main bulletin board in the lobby with their Here Comes the Sun theme board. Students have already brainstormed their ideas in advisory, and we have snuck a peek of the upcoming themes: spring sports, spring activities, and hobbies, vacation spots, and outdoor spring plants and animals. Students will continue to work on doors this week and will conclude their decorating after vacation. Judging will be taken place on the 26th, and there will be different categories for students to win.
Robotics. The Robotics Club has been working on many different things to prepare for next year. As the incoming 8th graders learn the ways of leading, they are excited to be the next captains of the 24-25 season. After a successful STEM Fair Day last month, this club hopes to continue to pique interest in STEM throughout all grade levels and make it apparent that learning can be fun. There are many hands-on things to do at the next STEM Fair, and if you missed it this year, we hope to see you there next year.
Guest speaker for Wilmington Middle School 7th graders. Amy Posk is an award-winning champion for business leaders. She's the co-founder and CEO of the Women's Business League and the founder Bold Moves, empowering ambitious interpretations and executives to exponentially increase their success. Amy is a brilliant motivational speaker and successful entrepreneur who believes in inspiring our youth, and she came to speak to our 7th grade students. Amy went over how to think more positively about yourself and had some really fun team building activities for the students to compete in.
Student Leadership Conference. Dr. Quirk and Ms. Simmons, along with 13 Wilmington Middle School students, were selected to attend the 2024 Student Leadership Conference at Essex Technical High School. The conference, co-sponsored by the Massachusetts Partnership for Youth and the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, is designed for middle school students eager to enhance and practice effective leadership skills. The students will explore various forms of leadership, including relational and formal versus informal leadership, while also learning to build meaningful and intentional relationships with others.
And lastly, on Jazz Band, Junior Jazz Band on April 4th, the Junior Jazz Band had the opportunity to perform at a concert with the high school jazz band. This was an awesome event to see, as many of the sub-freshmen and 7th graders had solos throughout the many different pieces that they got to play. Junior Jazz Band meets every Friday to practice music outside of their regular concert music and has an amazing group of kids that are involved. Many people went to support them the past week, and Mr. Lulu cannot wait to continue this program next year.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for that report.
Very much. Excuse me.
We're going to pass over item 4, because Ms. Bryson was not available to join us tonight. She's too busy racking up additional athletic accomplishments. You may have noticed that there are more people in the room tonight than there usually are at school committee meetings, and that is because of this next very special item that we have. So we have many Wilmington students here in the room, and I want to thank you for being here. Also want to acknowledge that we have members of the Select Board, as well as our temporary town manager. And I want to thank the school administration as well as the Veterans Department for all the work that happened and passed between those departments in order to make this happen. And we have tonight, we're going to award a diploma to a Wilmington veteran. And I'm going to read some information about that and about him, Elmer Drew. Mr. Turner has a little additional information about how he was honored by his high school class. And then the school committee will take a vote on the approval of the diploma, at which point we will be honored, and Dr. Brand will give the diploma and award the diploma to Elmer Drew's nephew, Warren Drew, who is with us tonight, as well as some other family members from the Drew family. And we thank them also for being here tonight for this special occasion. So, in November 2006, Governor Romney signed into law Chapter 130 of the Acts of 2005, an act providing benefits to service members, veterans, and their families. As a consequence of that, Section 4 of Chapter 71 of the general laws was amended to add the following paragraphs. Notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, school committees may award diplomas to any World War II veteran, Korean War veteran, or Vietnam War veteran who is a resident of the Commonwealth, who attended the high school maintained by the school committee, who withdrew from secondary school before graduation in order to serve in the armed forces of the United States, who did not receive a high school diploma. Actually, Tracy, didn't we have something to put up? Who did not receive a high school diploma as a consequence of that service, and who was honorably discharged from the armed services. And the following information comes partly from a 2019 article in the Town Crier, but mostly from Wilmington resident Paul Chalifort, who sent this information to me. Elmer Drew was a 17-year-old student at Wilmington High School when he joined the Navy. He had 3 brothers in the service, and he wanted to fight too. He arrived in England on May 5th, 1944, a month before the D-Day invasion. There he volunteered for the newly formed Naval Combat Demolition Units. Elmer's unit was assigned to Gap Assault Team 11, whose job was to use demolition charges of C2 explosives to create gaps in the obstacles the Germans had placed on Omaha Beach. As Elmer did not have time to be trained in demolition, he served as one of the coxswains for the team's rubber boats. On June 6, 1944, at 06:33 hours, Boat 11 hit the Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach and dropped its ramp. The unit was immediately hit with enfilading machine gun fire. Their sector of the beach was also covered by German artillery dug into fortifications that were nearly impervious to attack by sea, even by naval bombardment. As the team started to advance behind the Army engineers, German artillery began to zero in on Boat 11 and the Gap Assault Team. As Seaman Drew and the other coxswains struggled to drag the rubber boats ashore, an artillery round struck the boat and set off its cargo of demolition charges. Nearly the entire team was instantly killed, including Seaman Drew. He had been in the Navy for 6 weeks. The Naval Combat Demolition Units of Force O, Omaha, were later awarded a Presidential Unit Citation for their actions on D-Day. These units are now considered to be the U.S. Navy's first Special Forces and the precursor unit to today's elite Navy SEALs. As a consequence, Elmer Drew is listed on the Navy SEAL honor rolls. He was posthumously awarded a campaign medal with a Bronze Star, a World War II Victory Medal, a Purple Heart, and a unit citation ribbon with a Bronze Star. Mr. Turner.
Thank you. So I have 2 things. One, Ms. Ingersoll and did some great research and found from the school registers some of the attendance records from when Mr. Drew was a student at the school. And I went over to the library, and the library has some of our old yearbooks. And it turns out that the 1945 yearbook was dedicated to Mr. Drew and another young woman. And I was able, with the assistance of one of our fantastic librarians, Ms. Nicholson, to get a reasonably good copy of it, including a picture of Mr. Drew from the yearbook from that year. And the dedication reads, "To those of us who knew them as classmates, the recollection of them and their activities will remind us of Dorothy Grinnell and Elmer Drew for years to come. We are humbled by the memory of them, whom it was God's will to take before the sun had fully risen on their lives. A feeling of dear, sincere pride prevails for Elmer Drew, who made the supreme sacrifice for his country, and a feeling of sympathy for Dorothy Grinnell, who had the grave misfortune of ill health. Thus, we, the class of 1945, with deep humbleness and humility, dedicate in their honor this our class book." And so that's yours.
And with that, I would be looking for a motion to approve the awarding of a diploma to Elmer Drew. We have a motion by Ms. Burns, second by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. And Dr. Brand, if you would deliver the diploma to Mr. Drew.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that I'm accepting this for all my relatives that are alive on his behalf. And should thank your veterans. They put up a lot of sacrifice for people who don't even know.
Wilmington High School now has the honor of counting Elmer Drew among its graduates. Mrs. Burns.
Thank you. So to the Drew family, I just want to say with the most sincerest gratitude, the appreciation I feel. I think words really can't encompass exactly what I feel as a daughter-in-law of a World War II vet who fortunately was able to receive his diploma at the age of 90, about 5, 6 years ago. We know how fortunate we were to get our loved one back from that war, but words just I had something more eloquent, but I forgot to print it out. But he truly was a part of the greatest generation this country has ever seen, and we are so sincerely grateful for the sacrifice and sorry for the pain that comes with his loss and for our freedom. But thank you so very much.
All right, so at this point, we will be moving to our next item, which is the school choice hearing and public comment. But in recognition that, oh, I'm sorry, did you have a
Well, I'm
comment?
just wondering if we
Ms.
could
Dawson?
take a quick moment just to take some proper pictures before we move on to the next item,
Yeah.
if that's all right.
Absolutely. Well, what do you are thinking for?
I just thought we could just take a minute and do Dr. Brand with the family, if that's okay. And we can do it out in the hall too if you want to continue.
No, I think that we have certainly time to do that.
I'd like to make a motion to recess for 3 minutes, 5 minutes.
Second.
All in
Yep.
favor? All right, the
you.
committee will be in recess for photographs. And those who were here to honor Mr. Drew but are not necessarily interested in the rest of our school committee agenda, we
I don't know how you could not.
I mean, you know, get some good civic education here. But we will not be offended.
I'm ready for that.
There you go.
Win. The winning streak alive.
Thank you for coming.
If you depart. And we thank everyone very much for coming.
Thank you.
Regardless, yeah.
Look, because I think they add them into that document.
Okay.
All right, thank you. The committee is now resuming from recess. But before we move on, I'd like to invite Lou Samaglia, the temporary town manager and the town's longtime, if you could go to the microphone, and the longtime director of Veteran Services to say a few words.
In future.
In future.
I'd like to thank this school committee for doing this, and I'd like to thank Selectman Greg Bendel. We talked about this a few years ago, and to you young men and women in this audience, this young man was 17 years old, not a lot older than some of you, maybe younger than some of the ones that have left, and he felt the calling to serve his country. And the family getting this high school diploma means so much more than you'll know, because we're saying his name tonight. We're saying Elmer Drew. And Wilmington will never forget him. We say his name every Memorial Day. And I'd be willing to say we say it every day in the Veterans Office, when I used to be over there. But it's a nice honor, and at the end of the day, we will never forget. Wilmington will never forget. So again, thank you all for doing this for this fine family. and this
It's our
great young
honor
man.
to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just wait a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You go play hostess.
Oh, jeez, stop it.
You too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Greg.
All right, so refreshing, open public hearing, discussion, comment, close the public hearing, and then vote on.
That would be appropriate, yeah.
People who care about school choice.
David, I suspect they care more about item.
Okay, our next item is the school choice hearing, as well as the opportunity for public comment. This is prior to the school committee's decision whether to participate in school choice or not, and therefore, I'm looking for a motion to enter into the public hearing.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Fennelly, second by Ms. Burns. All in favor? All right, so we've now entered the public hearing. Is there any additional information, Dr. Brand, that you'd like to?
No, just as a reminder, there is information in the school committee packet regarding school choice. As you'll know, at the March 27th meeting, we provided you with similar information relative to school choice. There is quite a bit of information on, or related to the Department of Education website. Just as a reminder, for both the committee and those in the community, the Inter-District School Choice Program, otherwise often referred to as school choice, is actually governed under Mass General Law, Chapter 76, subsection 128, 12B, I'm sorry. It's been in place since 1991. School choice allows families to enroll their children in a school district other than the district in which the child or children live. There's a whole extensive array of advisory information for school committees and school districts on the matter. But I think it's important to point out again that under this school choice law, all school districts in Massachusetts are presumed to participate in and to admit non-resident students through school choice. It's an important point to point out. And any receiving district can withdraw from school choice only if a school committee holds a public hearing, which is the purpose of this evening, on this issue, and then votes to withdraw from the school choice program prior to June 1st. We obviously talked with some greater length at the last meeting, but with all of that is here tonight for your consideration and a vote in terms of our status as a school choice district for the 2024-25 school year.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment with regard to the school choice vote? All right, seeing none. Is there any further discussion or questions from the committee? Mr. Turner.
Just the one point for the record, that this is about us as a receiving district. It does not impact parents in town and their ability to make decisions for their children in any way, shape, or form. This is simply the question of whether or not Wilmington will participate to accept students in.
Exactly,
So
and
that's
thank you for the
important.
important clarification. Yes.
Mr. Samaha?
I feel a bit unprepared to vote on this tonight. I know that I guess we have until June 1st to make a decision, and I think I would like to know more about the districts that have chosen to remain school choice districts. How long have they been doing it? What are the pros and cons that they've experienced? I feel kind of like Ms. Bryson said, I think at our last meeting, where we're kind of always like, this sounds like it could be a good idea, but because of X, we're not going to do it this year. And we keep putting it off down the road. So I feel like I just want some more information I want to hear from some districts that have done it, and what do they think of it? I mean, I feel like we don't need to necessarily take a vote tonight when we can gather some more information and be more informed. I mean, I'm inclined to vote to not be a school choice district, but I feel like I'd like more information.
Ms. Burns?
And I'm recalling as best as I can the conversation from the last meeting. Going into school choice is really what our district in itself, so what it could look in Newburyport or look in any of the other communities would be different because their demographics are not, don't want to say demographics, that's probably not the right analogy, but their finances, their student numbers, all of that can change, as well as their municipal, what they get for monies. And I think, and I know, Dr. Bryson did say it almost feels like it's kicking the can down the road, but as our district does evolve, and we're considering the possibility of discussion with regards to letting, for staff, their children who are, non-resident, I think, and along with all these building projects happening with the Wildwood, I just want to make sure financially as well that we can sustain it if we step forward. It's a big obligation and responsibility for our district to take on these students. It's also additional time of staff to determine which grades we would have those seats. And I would want to know too, in considering it at that point, that in no way will it compromise, and as it's not supposed to, are the residents of our community. I do think, because the building project alone and those discussions with staff, I think, are viable and reasonable. Not to say that we won't do it, but I think it could actually be the first step into seeing what that information, what it looks like, and what it can be. You know what I mean? That's just my personal opinion, my perspective on this. Thank you.
Dr. Bryson?
I'm inclined to vote in favor of the recommendation for this year, but I wonder if it wouldn't make sense, Jay, to come up with a working group where a couple of us could actually do some of this research and maybe meet with a couple of districts and find out from them as we prepare for next year. I mean, I think looking at this, I'm like, okay, I clearly understand the recommendation and I'm in support of it. However, like I said last week, I agree with you. I think we need a bit more information, and I think taking the time to maybe talk with some of those districts, visit some of those, might be something that would be useful, if not obviously for the district, but for us as committee members who are tasked with making this decision every year. So I wonder if I could sort of, I guess, push us to sort of to vote, but also maybe come up with a working group. But I'm not opposed to holding off on it too, if people aren't comfortable with voting tonight.
Mr. Fennell?
So I had a very similar thought, but almost more like internal rather than external, meaning I'm inclined to support the recommendation for this year and strongly consider it for next year, but I wonder, for Wilmington, have we ever been a school choice community? Never, right? Okay. How many students could we feasibly accept? If we allow staff, children here, if we don't, if there's only a few, like, I think the working group makes a lot of sense, right? Maybe next school year isn't the best time, but it feels like we are often too quick to find an excuse to say, no, we'll do it next year, and not actually doing the diligence I think that this deserves. So I think I agree.
It sounds like it.
Mr. Turner?
I think being intentional about it and making positive decisions of whether we're going to do it or not based on a little bit more evidence makes a whole lot of sense. The one ask I would have for that sort of working group would be to reach out to our state representatives to see if there's any plans at the state level to change the funding mechanism. I hate to bring that up, but to the extent that that was set several years ago and has not moved, if it doesn't move, it becomes punitive on the receiving districts. And I would be curious to see if districts that have left, if part of why they left wasn't because the funding mechanism doesn't line up with, it's not connected to anything. It was a flat number that was picked several years ago and hadn't moved. So if that could be part of the scope, I would certainly agree.
I appreciate Mr. Smaha's comments, but I would note that although we don't have to make the decision until June 1st, that's not that far away, that it's only 40 days from now. And I don't know that we would have enough time to properly look into and conduct that kind of research in a place that would put us substantially more knowledgeable than we are now. But as people have been mentioning, I think that this is a good idea for us to look further into this and really take the time it deserves to study this a little bit more carefully. Ms. Burns.
As a resource, I would reach out to Glenn Kuchar at MASC. It may save you a lot of time in the research process with regards to who, what, pros and cons, and what one might need to consider when bringing this vote back up next year. That can be bring forth and considered. You know, I think he would save you a lot of time and really give you a broad view of many districts, and I think he'd get you on the right path.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? All right, then I would look for a motion to exit the public hearing. Motion by Ms. Burns, second by Dr. Mercaldi. All in favor? All right, so we've closed the public hearing. And now we have to take the vote. And I think I would phrase the motion as looking for a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation that Wilmington not participate in school choice for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fennelly and second by Ms. Burns. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda. And unless there's anything that the committee would like to be pulled out for further discussion, I think we'll just take this all together. So we have approval of minutes from the March 27th, 2024 regular session meeting, approval of the disposal of surplus equipment from the Office of Information Technology, approval of the disposal of outdated surplus literacy materials, approval of the revised superintendent goals, and then we have warrants, grants 24 and 25, revolving 49, 50, and 51, local 85 and 86, food service 52, 53, and 54, circuit breaker 23, special education 48 and 49, and payroll for April 10th, 2024. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Fennelly, second by Mr. Samaha. All in favor? And that is unanimous. That brings us to item 8, superintendent's report. Dr. Brand.
Thank you. Good evening. Two items this evening into the report. The first, very brief, hopefully, and the second, I'll have some help up here in just a moment with Mr. Hackett and Mr. Jones. But as is the case this time of the year, a notification to the school committee on what is anticipated to be the last official day of school. In our case, what would be the 180th school day, as a school district that has students in school in session, rather, for 180 days. As you'll note, the last day right now is currently projected to be Friday, June 14th. And that will be an early release day, as we've done in the past. Unforeseen circumstances, as noted in the memo, there's certainly a host of things. It's unlikely, but there are a host of things, not snow, but everything from, a system failure, a leak, to a power outage. So there are certainly things that can happen and do happen in any school year that may cause a school or schools to close and alter their end date. But right now, we're anticipating Friday, June 14th. As I mentioned, it's early release day. In the memo, it does mention professional development. It's just, I should note, it's not professional development specifically at all that is happening on that day, but rather professional-related activities as teachers and educators and staff sign off for the year, close down their programs, grades, and so on. So with that, though, we are looking for, right, we need a vote? No. We don't need a vote for this thing. Okay.
Bless you.
Item 8B is summer enrichment, and I'll ask Mr. Hackett and Mr. Jones, who are here, to come forward. We wanted to take this opportunity and share with the community an update on their hard work as efforts continue to try and grow and expand opportunities for Wilmington students in summer programming, which a lot of hard work has gone into this, and this is certainly an effort heading in the right direction, and thanks to the leadership and good thinking of these folks and working closely with Christine Elliott, we wanted to bring a little bit of a spotlight to this tonight. So thanks for being here, gentlemen.
Sure. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here to help spread the word about the program and inform you guys about our progress so far this year. This is really the third year that we've been trying to run the enrichment program, and we had some success the first year, but then we've doubled the enrollment in the programming since then, and we're off to a great start so far this year. Mike and I began the work back in the fall, recruiting teachers, trying to structure the programming to fit the timetable, get advertising set up and whatnot. And really wanted to get our registration process started a lot earlier this year. First year was more, April, I think. Last year was March, and we kind of realized that families were making their summer decisions certainly a lot earlier than we anticipated. So the goal was to get this year's out in January. And we were very surprised and happy that the registrations have been rolling in at a nice, consistent clip since then. We've got 37 individual registrations thus far, filling a total of 45 seats across the 14 classes that you can see on your screen. So we're excited about that. We've tried to utilize as many, sources of advertising as we can. So far, the most successful, according to our data, has been the district and principal newsletters. So we're very appreciative of the district and the principals for getting that information out to families consistently each week. And we look forward to seeing those registrations continue to roll in over the coming months, so we're off to a good start.
Comments and questions? Ms. Burns.
So I just have to say that I absolutely love the programs and the creativeness behind some of this, especially, I don't think I've ever seen, and I apologize if it was just me, but the program with the barbecuing with your kids, I thought that was such an awesome idea. And just a program where parents can engage with their kids in a structured learning experience. That is fun and at the back end rewarding, you know? So but I love that creativeness to bring parents in to learn with their kids, even though they probably know. You can always pick up a trick or two, I think, but I love that. I love seeing that. I thought that was fantastic.
I mean, all the offerings, it's kudos to our staff, right? I mean, the
Yes.
staff come up with those ideas, and on that one, credit the many talented Mr. Miranda, right? He's President Taft or Roosevelt in the school play. Master principal by day, barbecuer by weekend.
That's awesome.
It's a great addition, I agree.
That's awesome.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you very much for the effort on this. I love to see how much it's growing and the variety of different things across the spectrum. I did try to encourage the chicken grilling, but my son said, well, you can go on your own. I'm going to be in robotics, so I don't know that would quite work out for you. But no, the breadth of it and how much it's changing, and also the number of kids taking part, I think is fantastic, and the effort is awesome. Thank you.
Dr. McCauley.
Yep. So just to echo what they said, programs look really great. Your comment about getting out in January, that was a really good move, because I've been dealing with the camp fierce battle, and if you're not ready on those dates for some of the camps, you lose out. And it's early in January, so it's great that you guys kind of saw that and are not putting that out there early enough. So thank you.
Mr. Smaha.
Yeah, again, this all looks great. I'm curious if you use, so I'm looking at something like the introduction to robotics or some of the theater. If you use some of the, if you can engage some of the students, the older students who might have experience with that, are they a part of that, of any of those programs? Is that something that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year we started with the robotic students who were in the advanced helping with the intro, and this year we've started working through the idea of students having the opportunity to, now that they've taken the class and moved up to the high school, take on more of a leadership role, helping with our teachers who are leading the program to act again as solid role models and get them going in the right direction.
Yeah, Sam Prindeville, who's running the drama workshop, is also looking into doing the same. Yeah, so.
That's great.
Yeah.
Mr. Fennelly.
I will echo my colleagues. It's great. I know the program has continued to be successful, which is kudos to you guys, but obviously the breadth of offerings is impressive. I'm wondering, certainly not to shortchange it, but are there things on the horizon that you want to include? Are there programs that you'd like to see added?
So when we surveyed families, we did it 2 years ago, I believe, and Dr. Quirk was instrumental in helping get that survey out to families. Drama was one, and so that's a new addition this year, and it's doing really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe art was another one too, that we would love to eventually try to add to the repertoire as well. I can't remember any others off the top of my head, but those were the two biggies. That's
great.
Yeah. And we can survey again at some point as well.
You've got quite a bit here, so certainly not not trying to, it's not a negative judgment. I was just curious if there were folks clamoring for something that you hadn't had a chance to offer yet, so that's helpful. Thank you.
No, but it's important. You want to know what the community wants, right, as opposed to what we want to offer, so, yeah.
Awesome.
And working within the framework of the custodial staff in the summer, trying to stay out of their hair, but also try to use as much of the space as we can. So we're definitely in debt to them in terms of their flexibility.
Very good.
Dr. Bryson?
And I'll just say, and this is all held here at the high school.
Except for one
Except for
class. Two. The middle school and elementary drama are going to be at the middle school, and
middle
that's a space consideration for the custodial staff.
But
Yeah.
still, we're having, a lot of elementary kids are coming into this building, which I think is huge, just to get them exposed to this space, for them to see themselves as future Wildcats here. Like, I think there's a lot to be said for when we talk about retention. I think this is actually a really big piece of getting our students to want to be in this building. So, I mean, it's a beautiful space. It's lovely in the summer. I mean, it's just such a great place to be, and it's so great to see the vibrancy that you've created and to see so many kids of all ages. I think it's just really, feels really healthy when you drive up in the morning. So thank you for putting all this time into it. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about how you price the different offerings? Some of them are, there's definitely a big range of price in some of them. And I'm curious how you choose, what the fee will be.
Yeah, so we worked closely with Miss Elliott, trying to find a price structure that was very reasonable for families, but one that could pay the stipend to the teacher, any minor supplies that the class may have. Some don't need any, but obviously, a CAD class needs the filament for the machine and whatnot, so supplies. And then really the goal of part of the goal of what we're trying to do here is to try to offset what can be a loss on the remedial side of the summer program due to some hardship waivers that end up coming in. So we looked around. We looked around to other districts and other programs. We looked at the tech and tried to figure out, generally per hour, what are similar programs charging, and we came up with a fee structure that we thought, was really reasonable, but could provide that little cushion on the remedial side of things as well. And, with Miss Elliott, we were able to come up with something I think was reasonable. Some of that variation in the price structure, though, is hours, just time, contact, right? I mean, you got some of these that are, I think, upwards of, 12, 16 hours, some are only 4 hours, so that's the reason for some of that big variety in there. Like the drama one is a full, not a full day, but a full week, as opposed to just a couple hours.
All right, I think.
Okay, good. So it's not too late for those that are watching. There's still certainly time to register and sign up. I know that this form has been plastered in many places, but one more time, shout out for where they can find the information if they want to sign their children up.
Yep, so they can go to WPSK 12, just to the website there, and click on the homepage, the news, or I forget how it's worded on the homepage,
Announcements.
but yeah, announcements, and click on that, and it should be right there.
Fantastic, that's great.
Thanks.
And in the newsletter.
Thanks,
All
gentlemen.
right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your help promoting it.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Next, item number 9 is public comment. Mr. Fennelly.
Thank you. There were 2 public comments submitted in the packet ahead of time that we've had a chance to review. No one signed up in advance, but as we always do, we'll open the meeting for public comments. I'd ask you to state your name and address for the record, please, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Kevin McDonald, 140 Andover Street. At a previous meeting, I asked the superintendent and the administration of finance if they would get me the answer, and for that matter, the town, the answer to how much the town, as particularly the school committee, and the budget for the school committee had left over and went into free cash last year.
Mr. McDonald, the school committee generally does not respond to public comments. It's an opportunity for members of the public to express their opinion and have their say on issues related.
Okay,
to school
I guess
committee's
this is a question to Mr. Brand and Mr. Ruggiero. In response to requests that I had at the previous meeting, if you could tell us how much money from the budget went into the town's free cash last year. Can you respond to that or no?
No, this is an opportunity for you to express your opinions and thoughts, but not to engage in a back and forth discussion with the committee. But we are happy for you to engage with us outside of the committee meeting, to ask questions, to speak to us, but that's not the purpose of the public comment in the meeting.
Let me ask you something. Would you be willing at the next school committee meeting to actually have an answer to actually respond back to the taxpayers, an answer to that question?
I would ask if you have questions that you would like responses to contact the committee or the superintendent, either by emailing us or calling us. And
I'm contacting you right now. I have other people in town that would like to know, because our town has millions and millions of dollars in free cash. And it would be nice to know, not only for me, but for the entire town, how much of the budget last year that didn't get used went into free cash. So if you don't want to answer that tonight, my question's simple. At the next meeting, would you give the community an answer to that question?
the agendas of the committee meetings are established in advance based on what the committee has to cover related to the school system. If you have questions that are related to the finances, you can send those to us. It's probably best to go to the town, but the public comment of the school committee meetings is not a time where we engage in back and forth.
Okay, you are transmitting some warrants tonight for the school expenditures. Can you tell us what the total dollar amount that you will be voting on tonight is on those warrants?
Mr. McDonald, if you're just going to ask questions, I'm going to.
That's my last question. It's
Bring
just,
your comments to a close.
I'm closing after that, after I get that answer. I don't have any other questions beside those two.
No. Thank you very much for your public comment.
It's a question, not a comment.
Well, this is a
You're voting on warrants tonight for expenditures. I don't know the exact number, but I think the school budget's hovering at like $40 million a year. And so, in reasonable terms,
Mr. McDonald, the time for your public comment has ended.
Mr. Ragsdale, you've interrupted me several times. So what I'm simply asking you is, legally, when you take a vote to approve warrants, isn't it reasonable that every member on the committee knows the dollar amount and they hear it at the meeting as well as the public seeing it, what you are voting on? Why would you want to not be transparent on that?
Mr. McDonald, I'm going to ask you to please sit down now. You're out of order.
I'm going to be walking out of here right now, and to be quite honest with you, Mr. Ragsdale, as the chairman who puts together the agenda, for you to not be able to answer those questions is very disappointing. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? All right, then that will be item 9. And that brings us to new business, item 10. And first is the FY revolving report. Dr. Brand, Mr. Ruggiero.
Thank you. In your packet is a copy of our FY '24 revolving account report through parts of March. As you can see, we're in good shape in all of the various accounts, and I'm confident we'll finish the year in the black in each one of those revolving accounts. And just to remind the community that for each of these revolving accounts, revenues received for the activities for that revolving account can only be used to support activities associated with that account. Funds cannot be moved to support other initiatives. So as an example, funds that come in for, I'll say preschool tuition, as an example, can only be used to offset, revenues that come in there can be used to offset some expenses related to preschool activities only.
All right, comments and questions. Dr. McCaldy.
Yep, so anyway, thanks for presenting this. So it appears that a lot of the revolving accounts have pretty healthy balances, so which is great. I was just wondering, in general, for all the accounts, are there any ones that are causing you any concern, or ones that you think needs a little extra focus, like ones that are kind of coming in a little tight or maybe a little over or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not concerned with any of them that are tight. There are a couple that have some pretty hefty balances. Food service is one, and Mary Palin, our coordinator of food service, director of food service, is working diligently to spend some of those funds with free meals. The reimbursement rate's a lot more than what we used to charge. So she is working, we're looking at different things. She has to replace some equipment. I think, matter of fact, we just got a $47,000 requisition to replace an exhaust system at one of the schools that just came in. So she's replacing equipment that needs to be replaced, and she's working diligently. So DESE also comes in and monitors the food service account periodically, and that's one thing they want to make sure you don't have too much in the surplus, but that's one account that we have to work on, and Mary is working on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All right, that brings us to item B, discussion of the new Massachusetts IEP.
Sure. Ms. Brown-Legrand is coming forward, and we'll, just as they get set up here, there are a couple of documents in your packet that accompany this very briefly, and they're going to go into certainly more information. But the reason that this is here is because the state has been working for some time now to provide updates on the parameters around special education, specifically the Individual Education Plan, or IEP, as it's often referred to. This plan has been really fairly static and not updated since, I think, the early 2000s, and so they've been working for some years, as you'll learn more about, to chart the course for changes and improvements. This is obviously something that impacts many of our students in our community, just like any district around us. We have a large percentage of our students whose education does also get governed by this, and so we thought it only appropriate to make sure that the school committee as a whole and our community is up to date on the changes. So with that, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Actually, if I can just hold you for one moment else, I just want to offer, give one more offer to anyone who is looking for an opportunity to depart but feels trapped and like that it might be rude to get up and leave. That I do want to offer again that it's perfectly fine if anyone wishes to leave the meeting. We
You
won't
don't
be-
see the
we won't be-
enthusiasm in
we
all
won't
these
be- we
faces
won't- we
to
won't be
stay?
we won't be offended if anyone goes.
Someone took you up on it.
All right. But, please feel free to
We
leave it-
appreciate
to
the
leave at any
audience,
time.
gentlemen. Thank you.
But, I don't want to feel like you're awkwardly trapped there. All right. Thank you very much.
All righty. Thanks for having us. We're planning to kind of do an overview, talk a little bit about the kind of 30,000-foot view changes to the document, talk a little bit about the process, kind of how the state got here, our plan that has been kind of ongoing for training, et cetera, and then I figured there'll be questions. So this has actually been, the changeover of the new IEP has been a long time in the making. It's been a number of years. They've taken a lot of feedback from stakeholders. They worked with Alan Bloom, who's kind of really well-known in really all of New England, but particularly in Massachusetts, for really kind of being the current guru about how to design IEPs, how to ensure that you're making sure that students' needs are being met, going towards a data-driven process. He's somebody I brought in about 2018 to kind of take a look at our IEPs, the way they were written, kind of look at the way we were designing accommodations and supports for students and moving towards a little bit more of a data-driven goal and objective writing kind of for IEPs, just so they were clearer, easier, measurable, and so which has served us well because they actually used Alan to design the new IEP. And some of the early things that we took on in terms of how we sectioned out accommodations on plans actually is now its own sections on some of the IEPs. So a number of districts were opted, or all districts were opted to be an early adopter. We chose not to do that in part because we were coming out of the pandemic, in part because that's just a lot to go through kind of the growing pains with the state over the document changing multiple times. The other real big issue for us would have been there would have been no database software system to generate those documents. So they were in some cases using Word docs, some of those districts. I felt kind of coming out of the pandemic that was maybe not the best place for us to put our energy at that point. It was intended to be adopted in fall of '23. There was some delays with an adoption now. All districts are expected to adopt the new IEP form in fall of '24. So we have been working on training, and Maura's going to talk in a second kind of a little about the training that we've done with all of the staff, really kind of starting last year, but kind of in big swing this year. But by the end of next year, the end of 2025, all students in the district will have their IEP on the new document. So for example, if you're having an initial evaluation in the middle of next year, it'll be on the new document. If you have a child that's already in special education for whom may have a re-eval well. Their IEP that's currently on the old document will stay until they have their reevaluation at that point in the year, and then their next IEP will generate it on the new document. Same for a child that might have an annual review. So we're not going to change everybody's over. There's no expectation we have to change everybody by the beginning of the fall. But by the end of next year, everybody will be on the new document, if that makes sense.
And so then that leads us into what we've been doing for the training, for the planning. So I think as Alice shared, like, the original rollout was to be a year ago, and now we're in 2024. So there's been lots of conversations ongoing about moving the direction. So it's been conversational, and then we started with the formal trainings. And we've done utilizing CIT days and staff meetings. We utilize resources from DESE, train the trainers. We've all, like, between our office staff, team chairs, Alice and I, special education liaisons, everybody's been involved in some sort of formal training, and it will continue. And so we started with the spring, summer, fall 2023, with the DESE training. Going into the fall and winter, we've been part of working with Alan Bloom. We as staff members have been in the office, been training with that, but we also had parents, had an opportunity to be part of Alan Bloom's training with his presentations virtually. We have been working with the grades, utilizing our CIT days as well as staff meeting days, trying to get the best opportunity of time to be able to train the staff members, the special education teachers, liaisons, team chairs. But we couldn't do it all in one sitting, right? Because there's only so much time, so many opportunities. So we utilize CIT days in the fall, and then the spring we're using staff meetings coming up for the elementary schools, coming up now into April and May. We have used PGU on Saturday. We offer training there as well. We're doing another training in June, and that'll be virtual as well. We'll do additional trainings in the fall. So we've done some, we'll continue to do some, and we know there's going to be more training. And I think, generally speaking, checking in, and this is not a formal survey at all, but just checking in with some of our liaisons and those of us who've been trained, there is a sense of comfort level of being knowledgeable. We've, as Alice pointed out, using Alan Bloom, he's been part of our kind of communication as liaisons. As a former special education teacher writing IEPs, Alan Bloom was kind of our go-to person, and we've utilized his resources, and now something that we are comfortable with in our IEP writing is now part of the new IEP. The language is set up, and so there is some familiarity with that already, so I think that's going to help ease as we go into the newness of it all.
So there are some specific kind of founding principles of the new IEP, and I think this is important because it lets everybody know why some of the changes occurred.
That's okay, yeah, we'll pipe in, yep.
And so, one of the things that they were really looking to do is increase student voice in the document. Also, stakeholder voice as well. If you look at the new document, there are a number of sections that include students that may have other agencies involved with them. That was not something that was reflected necessarily in the old document. The idea of collaboration and being able to look at a student's goal or objective and their needs and identify what the accommodations are going to be for that specific area, where that is going to be in the IEP. Those are all kind of changes, so there's not this introductory section where all the accommodations are listed. Now it's kind of going to be attached to specific goals and specific needs, which I think helps. It's going to be a format change in terms of where to look for something, but I think at the end of the day, all the information about one specific need being in one place is going to be helpful. Again, working on making the goals and objectives more data-driven, I think, is a big piece of this document. I think we're in good shape with that. And there is more of an attempt to identify the student voice and create a profile for who that child is as a learner by creating a profile section to the IEP, a student profile section, which drives some of the needs later on. So I really think it's going to be a big change. I think people will, change is hard. But I think we've actually done some surveys, with the surveys not completely closed yet, but I think for the most part, while people are stressed, they're feeling about the changes of the document, what's the orientation of it, and the focus on the child is actually people I think are pretty positive about, with the caveat that they're stressed about just change in general.
The newness of it.
Yeah, the newness of it, absolutely. Was this me? Yeah.
I was just gonna
yeah,
highlight,
yeah.
you talk about the student and parent voice, so that's, when you look at the new IEP format, that's really the first question that's asked, right? It used to just be parent concerns, but now we drive in, and that's the whole driving of the meeting. We'll start off with what are the parent concerns or the student concerns, what their age level, and having that information. And so that's really going in, so everything building up in the IEP and answering the areas that we need to address is driven from that voice, right?
Yep.
And so that's really important to note.
Absolutely. So things that people, I think, ask, the form is different, and I think the format and the amount of changes is what has people stressful, but the eligibility process has not changed, right? The categories for disability has not changed. The questions are asked regarding eligibility have not changed. That has not changed in any capacity. It is a form change. It feels like more than that, but it is essentially where we're going to put the information into the document. That is the biggest change. So the questions that are asked, whether to make a child eligible or re-eligible, those things are not going to change. There is slight term changes that occur into the document, and I think that will just take a little bit. So PLEPs, or the present level of educational performance that everybody used to refer to as PLEP A, PLEP B, there's no acronym anymore for that. It's present levels of, and then they kind of, academic and behavioral, they have different sections, but the idea of having an acronym or kind of a cheat word for something is kind of gone. And the other big change is there was a non-participation justification in the previous IEP. So why are we not having this child participate in general education? They're asking you to identify what is their participation. So I think making it more positive, focusing on the idea of least restrictive environment, and asking teams to identify what have you done as interventions if the child is not participating prior to them being pulled out of the general education environment, which I think is just a good kind of mind shift for people when we're looking at kind of the differences. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. The other big changes are really kind of, there's some, formatting changes in terms of the page, number of pages. In part, the document, and there's an example, but was shifted from portrait to landscape, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think when people oftentimes use binders and are used to kind of having the document this way, now it's this way, and it's a minor but a big thing when this is kind of your world and something that you've been very used to. Currently, we're asked to identify a primary disability, a secondary disability if necessary. That's not something that's required. It essentially becomes a checkbox in the next document. So there's no identification necessarily of primary, secondary disability if there is one. There's, again, no acronyms. The transition planning form now, which is a kind of form that we complete in preparation for completion of an IEP, is now part of the IEP, which I love. I think that's great. Because it talks about kind of what the goals are for the students long-term, what are their transition goals. There's a separate page for accommodations and modifications. It kind of looks a little bit differently. Very focused on data, and then we talked to, the big change also, for those of you that whose children might have extended school year services, is there are now 2 grids instead of 1. So instead of having to kind of look and see where is the ESY or the summer school component on the grid, it's actually separated, which I think is great. It'll take a little getting used to, but I think it's actually great. Makes it a little bit easier, I think, for families that are not sure which one of the thing in the chart is actually summer school and which is school year. So I think there are some good things.
And that talks about the obvious layout. And so there's been a bit of conversation that it may indeed be a portrait layout. There's been some conversation. But as far as we know, still, we kind of checked, we followed up on it today, like, it's still leading towards portrait, but there's still conversation that it may be, it's leaning towards landscape.
Yeah.
That has been the direction, but I don't think, we haven't heard with great certainty.
No. When we wrote this, ESPED had notified us, which is our database system, that they're going to work on making it a portrait orientation. And then we heard after that DESE said no. So I'm not sure where that is. Minor thing, but believe it or not, a big thing when you kind of look at files and kind of the way people are used to reading the document. Other kind of notable changes. So one of the things that DESE also put out a technical manual and really wants the IEP meetings to really focus on the writing of the document itself. Right now, a good chunk of the meetings are kind of talking about evaluation results. About 2 or 3 years ago, DESE came out. Parents have always had access to the IEP, the reports, ahead of time, the assessment reports ahead of time for an initial reevaluation. A couple of years ago, DESE came out and put it it onto the consent, asking parents whether or not they like the reports ahead of time, rather than them having to ask and not having that as a place to make kind of just a checkbox when they submit the consent. I think that was in preparation for the idea that they want parents to have reports ahead of time. We want to encourage parents to read those reports ahead of time with the intention that come the meeting, it's a summary and not a walkthrough necessarily of every single section of a testing that may have been done. There's still going to be plenty of time for questions and, concerns and identifying student strengths and weaknesses, but not that maybe 40 minutes of a meeting are spent kind of reviewing a report that sometimes parents have had ahead of time. All of our parents get copies of the evaluations ahead of time. And so that's a shift, I think, even as a former school psychologist, right? A big piece of your job is connected to kind of presenting those reports and results that you spend a lot of time at a meeting. So I think that will be a shift for everybody. And there will be some meetings where you'll have to do more explaining, and some where the parents will feel comfortable maybe with the data. And, I think checking in with the parent at the beginning of the meeting to say, I know you had the opportunity to have those reports. Is there questions or anything that, how is your comfort level with the material? And then kind of the decision of how much detail to go into is going to be based to some degree off of that at a meeting. But really kind of encouraging parents to look at those reports, which I think most of our parents do.
I think that's been the practice now
Yep.
that we've been doing, definitely since post-COVID. And so I think that the
Absolutely.
flow of the meeting starts off like that.
Yep. And we've asked the teams and the team chairs to kind of get to a place, at least during this year, where we start to encourage parents to take a look, ask some of the service providers to maybe scale down a bit their description of the evaluations. Of course, if parents have questions, we can do that. More scaling down for parents that are comfortable and familiar with the information, so that the bulk of the time is really spent writing the IEP itself and putting in kind of more thoughtful accommodations, goals, objectives that are all tied together. Again, to service delivery pages, there are additional things that we consider now, but that are not necessarily part of the document that I think are great additions. Whether or not you have to consider assistive technology on the child, whether that's a need for the child, is automatically pre-populated. We have had to consider, whether the child is vulnerable of being a perpetrator or a victim of bullying. For a number of years, that's always gone in kind of an additional information section on the IEP, because there's no real place to do that. There's now specific questions about that, which I think is great. And depending on your answer, you might get more questions, right? It pre-populates kind of additional questions based on your answer. Students that are ELL or ML, multilingual learners, there's going to be questions regarding that. So the intent, I think, of the change in the document is really to kind of integrate all of the child's needs all together, rather than having kind of the IEP be made the educational document. Maybe they have, ELL services that are not reflected here. Maybe they have other assistive tech needs that are integrated but not kind of completely clear in the document. The inclusion of transition planning form being inside the document, something that everybody will have access to, that is able to, support the child. And the other big piece for us is students that have a guardianship component. It's going to be very clear when guardianship was obtained, who is the guardian. That helps, obviously, just changeover in staff. So when one child goes to the next staff member, they know they can answer that information. They know exactly who signs the IEP, who's responsible for the IEP, et cetera. Good. I can pause if that would be better.
Do you request the legal paperwork?
You have to.
With
We
the
have
file?
to.
Okay.
Yep. In order for us to identify who signs the IEP, we have to have a copy of the guardianship paperwork. Yep, if there is guardianship.
Thank you.
Yep. So that would, I'd say, so that would exist in a file that, let's say, somebody at the high school might not have access to, and so by word of mouth, they would have to know who is then the guardian. But if that's now on the document, who the guardian is and the date that it was obtained.
You wouldn't get a copy of that?
We would.
You would,
The
okay.
teachers would not
Of
have
course,
a copy. I'm
okay,
sorry.
right,
It just
thank
makes
you.
it easier for people that are communicating with who
Of
might be
course.
the most important person in that child's life, or adult's life at that point. So, a couple of things, the meetings will be longer right out of the gate. I think the adjustment to the new document is going to cause things to be longer. It's hard to predict kind of what that will eventually look like, but I do think that once people become more comfortable with the where things go piece and the questions that we're asking, it will naturally just become a little bit more condensed, and I think it will flow a little bit better, but I think it'll be clunky, I think, at first, for the first few. I think that's just a piece of it. even with all the training that we do for staff on, goals and objectives and kind of where it's going and what the IEP looks like, kind of the questions or the things that you anticipate from section to section, and thousands of IEP meetings you may have been in before will be different, right? So I think that adds to kind of a little bit of the length of the meeting.
No, just say the adjustment to the flow, the knowledge is there. It's a process that we do. It's just kind of taking that information, parents as well as the staff, getting used to identifying it here. So it's not the new information, it's how we're putting it down on paper. So it is, we're all on that learning curve together, right? And so I think through our trainings and through our conversations all year long, we're aware of that and just kind of being mindful of that at the same time. So we'll get there. Yeah, we're on our way.
Yep. So just in terms of parents, I think the biggest piece is that there's a huge student voice to this that I think really didn't necessarily exist before. Process is the same, eligibility process is the same, the form is different, right? The way that we get to the end product is different in terms of the questions maybe, and the format is a little bit changed, but the eligibility, nothing changes about that, nothing changes about evaluations or anything. We are required, we have gotten a couple of questions about this, so you can't opt out of the new form, right? So we have to do the new IEP during the course of next year. So by the end of the year, everybody will be on that. At some point, the software systems will phase out the old, even access to creating a new old IEP, if that makes sense. There are resources on the website, as well as obviously the DESE website for the DESE Improvement Project. We have done a couple of parent nights already with Alan Bloom. We have another one coming on June 11th. We're going to attempt to do an in-person /Zoom. We'll see how that goes. But hopefully in here. And I think and then we'll do something in the fall. I kind of want to see kind of turnout feedback from the one in June, and then see whether we're doing something kind of right away in the fall, or we just wait a bit until the fall, maybe the end of September kind of thing, depending on where we're at for parents. This will be a little growing pains, but I think at the end of the day, it's a good changes, some good changes. Questions? I know there's questions. Go ahead.
Well, I have to wait for my chair to recognize me first.
Ms. Burns.
She's going to get me into trouble.
Ms. Burns, you're recognized.
So I've got a lot of opinions, none of which I think that germane for what this is. And it's, so we can talk offline on my personal opinions, but I do have operational financial impact concerns, because with everything that DESE rolls out, there is a financial impact. And I understand, I know that you and I have chatted briefly with regards to the time in creating, in the transition of IEPs onto the new IEPs on staff at meetings, which would have specialists, out of their classrooms or off of their schedules for longer than typical, which only sets back those other students they may have that are missing their appointments. I have a grand concern, because that impacts the whole workflow of the department in many ways, in servicing students. But I also worry about the financial impact, and I know we talked about it, because when I went to this workshop back at conference in November, there was no funding cycle at that point from what they shared with us. But you had mentioned that there was a
So the 274 grant, which was I have to look at my money here, Paul, but it's $26,000 or $27,000 we got, was specifically dedicated to materials, training, subs if needed. We bought Alan Bloom books for every single staff member that's connected with the IEP development in any capacity. So that has been for us, and it's really just through July 1, right, I believe.
June 30th.
June 30, yeah, for this year.
So does that cover all that impact from this new transition?
So it will.
Financially, I should ask.
So in terms of training, materials, yes, it has so far covered all of that.
So it is a funded mandate then, would you say? Because I want to know if it's a funded or underfunded mandate.
So the intention of the 274 grant was to help districts provide
Startup?
professional development materials, et cetera, connected to training staff and/or books or whatever was needed for the new IEP. So yes, I would say it has covered all of our expenses related to that currently. I thought your question was more along the lines of the impact of kind of the changeover of the actual development of the IEPs
Well,
come next
I
year,
know
which
that
I feel like
there's-
is a slightly different.
Well,
answer.
but time is money.
Yes.
You know, and IEPs, you know, I do think it is helpful, because I know when I was in the early stages with my children.
Yep.
The biggest thing that made the largest impact were the recommendations, the why.
Yep.
You know, and then kind of backfilling. This will, you know, and then having that time to crunch on it and Google.
Yeah.
But, so I think that's that may be helpful, and I think there'll be new pathways, I think, teams can work together on, so that the decisions that are, the goals developed and the decisions made are well-educated and understood.
Yep.
So that's a good thing. I just think, like, this time, the amount of time, I mean, granted, there's nothing we can do.
Yep.
You know, I think it's going to be problem-solving. I just fear that we're going to go backwards because this is mandatory, but we're still held to our obligations of evaluations and
Yep.
results being given to parents and evaluations
Yep.
being done.
Yep.
Teams meeting on a specific time. And this here is going to make it very difficult to meet those timelines. You know, if you've got extended meetings and specialists, I mean.
Right.
Because you've got to balance out the responsibilities to the students within the programs with the team meetings, and maybe it has to be creative, but that's just my overall concern. I know that I think we want to try to problem solve as best as we can before, you know what I mean, as we go along and it gets rolling. But because I just think best intents can sometimes go awry in the implement, you know, how do you figure it out in a school day?
Right.
So, but, thank you.
Can I? Yeah.
Please continue answering.
So I think there's a couple of things. I think there are some things that are going to lengthen the length of the meetings, right? There's some questions being asked, the things that we didn't necessarily have to touch before. But when we really step back and look at the document, once our staff, with our support, is able to identify what is going where in the document, which, so some of it, most of it already exists in our existing documents. Yep. It's just the identification of where are we talking about what, which is kind of our job this year in the summer with the staff. Then their comfort level is going to become, because they'll know when we get to this page of the IEP, what goes in that section and what doesn't, right? What from the PLEP A, and where does that go into the new document? So I think that's where we're at now. We've passed the point of which we're just talking about kind of the changes, showing them the document. We're moving towards a little bit of the nitty-gritty of like goals and objectives, where the accommodations go, what do you put here in different sections of the IEP. I think that's when people will become more comfortable, and then once we actually do it a few times, it's hard to predict, but I would think that we're going to have a little less of these lengthy kind of drawn-out meetings, you know.
Only because I know at my IEP meetings, they could go an hour and a half to two, you know what I mean? And I just wanted to make sure, you know.
But even now with the IEP, the process, a meeting can have to be longer than expected or shorter than expected. It really depends, right? Like, there's a process to follow, and we'll follow the process. And we're mindful of time, and we have strategies to support time if needed, right? So I think once we get used to it, once we drive into it, we're actively understanding it. It's going to become more similar, more understanding, and just, we always recognize the time frame of a meeting, so.
Yeah.
I think.
We'll see, but.
I know it's a work in progress.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So on slide 6, you mentioned, I think it was slide 6, a lot of the benefits in the new form.
Yep.
You've also talked to, there's going to be a learning curve on the format, and certainly meetings could be longer. Is there anything from the old form that you feel like is missing, or are there any gaps that you see you'll have to address to make sure we're meeting the kids' needs and addressing any of the issues that need to be addressed.
I think the changes to the document are very good. I think that there are some things that we're adding, let's say, an additional information that's now integrated into it. And I think it evens out to ensure that there's not human error across multiple, like, different people that are running a meeting, by making sure these questions are pre-populated, you have to answer them. It's a yes or no click box, you have to in the system, right, to do that, to kind of move on. So I think there's some benefit to it. I think what is going to be and what I've gathered from, like, our feedback from people, the stumbling block is the uncomfortable when there's certain things are uncomfortable with. The beginning of the IEP was kind of key evaluation summaries. It was a summary of all of your assessments. So if you wanted to see how a student did on his last 3-year evaluation, you could flip that open, go to the second or third page, depending on where it was, and you could identify by date kind of what the summary of their assessments were. That's not what they're looking to do. So I think that's probably, for me, the only drawback is there's really not that section. They want kind of current information to be tied with the child's IEP goals and objectives and their present levels, so to speak. There's not going to be this couple of page summary of assessment results. So it's good and bad, right? I think sometimes old information doesn't necessarily reflect who a child is, so sometimes having too many years of information in there is not great. But I think it's just an easy reference point for people that it won't necessarily have the same feel to it. So some of that information will be in a file in our office, essentially, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I would say that for me, that's probably the thing I'm the most uncomfortable with, is because I do that 100 times a week.
I think that's been and that point, I think, has been a big part of our conversations when we have had our in-staff district training, questioning that. What is that going to look like when we get there, actually?
Yeah.
Right? Because it is something that really we all put a lot of effort into writing the reports, sharing the reports, referencing it. So I think that will be one of the biggest adjustments.
Right. I think that's the thing if I had anything, a little bit of a criticism, is that kind of key evaluation summary section.
Mr. Samaha?
Yeah, thank you for this. This is a lot, so thank you for putting this together. For us, I think this is a pretty clear and concise as best it can, because this is, like I said, this is a lot, and I've got a lot of thoughts and ideas about it, so I'll keep it brief. I appreciate the rollout of the training of this. It looks like you're really hitting everybody that needs to be trained, especially ahead of time. I wish the Boston Public Schools would roll it out as well as it seems to be rolling out for the trainings in WPS. A lot of these changes are positive and long overdue. The question about, is there anything missing from the old IEP to the new IEP? No, everything in the old IEP is in the new IEP, plus it's organized better, and a lot of things just make way more sense. And I think sort of like the last thing that is really important for everybody to sort of understand is that this document, and even I believe how the meetings are going to be run, is going to be better for families. It's taking the old IEP it's just so convoluted, the way it's set up, and the way I see this new IEP, everything just makes so much more sense. And I think I think in education, a lot of times we make things so much more complicated than they need to be. And I think this is an example of something that might seem like a bureaucratic thing, but it's no, actually, this is actually it's going to be longer meetings and more more paperwork, but at the end of the day, it's going to be better for families, and I think even better for teachers too, to be able to see. Even when you look at the service grid, and you're between the ESY and the regular school year, it's even as a teacher sometimes you're wait, am I supposed to be? Oh no, that's the ESY thing. I don't know. Okay. So thank you for this, and I appreciate. I'll work with it.
Any other questions, Mr. Bennett?
I've got a few that I'll follow up with later, because I think that they may take more time than we have. But I'm curious. I'm not overly familiar with this process, but what I understand to be a change in sort of the focus on the student and what the student wants, right?
Yep.
The student's vision. What if the student doesn't want to participate or isn't willing to engage? Then what happens?
So that's a good question. That was one of our questions when we met with, that's what somebody asked when we met with DESE. And so their response was, and I do believe this, I think our special educators know our students really well, right? And so I think the idea that we have to ask these pointed questions, for some kids, yes. For other kids, I think the teachers know the answer. And for some students, their goal might be as simple as just being able to attend for more than 10 or 15 seconds. Or, even our kiddos that have kind of limited ability to communicate, we know kind of what their interests are, right? We know kind of what they like to do. It might be a little bit harder to identify kind of what their specific goal is for them for the next year. But I think our teachers know the kiddos really well. For the even general education teacher, if it's not a student that's necessarily, in a program that has needs, to be able to answer a lot of these questions.
I think on that note, the building of the relationship,
Yeah.
the special education teacher and the gen ed teacher, building that relationship with the student, being able to, in that process, to know the information, to guide, support, and get them to a place to want to participate, perhaps, so.
Yeah. I mean, from a logistical point of view, so, one of the questions is, by the time I finish elementary, middle school, whatever the answer might be, if it's a student that has more difficulty or more challenges, I would ask them to identify kind of what our goal would be, but put the caveat that that was identified by the team potentially, if you can't identify with the child.
You got anything else?
I'm good. Thank you.
One of the challenges at the start of each school year is just having enough time for teachers to review IEPs before we actually get started with school. How do you think that cuts with this new IEP? It's longer, so there's more pages to review, but there's also an argument that it's clearer in certain ways, and by pulling pieces apart, that it's easier to necessarily parse. Like it's, page length is not the only thing that controls, how much time it takes to prepare or review something.
So since January, we have been uploading signed students' IEPs into Aspen. So all teachers have access to the IEPs in Aspen. From anybody that's at a meeting January forward, our administrative assistants are going to go backwards for the students from August through. So everybody will be uploaded essentially by the summer, if that makes sense. And so I think when the rollover occurs and teachers have access to their classrooms in Aspen, they're going to have access to all the students' IEP data as well for next year. So they won't be necessarily receiving either copies of their IEP or kind of at-a-glance snapshot is what typically general educations would receive, teachers would receive, which is you're not able to do this with this document, right? They'll have access immediately upon the rollover in Aspen. And in part, we did that because we knew this was going to be a very different document than the document that existed before. So anybody that's had an IEP meeting since January on, it's in Aspen, assuming it came back, in some capacity signed, or it's been returned to the district. And then the students before are slowly being uploaded. They'll all be done by the summer, early summer.
Thank you. Ms. Burns?
Just to touch upon what Jesse, so we talked about this with regards to how teachers and how teams build it, but one of the key roles, especially because that was a question I had in looking at the first couple of pages, is that I knew my 3-year-old was not going to be a contributory factor. So the parents' involvement and in the collaboration and the building of the IEP is one of the essential key components to merge with what the staff is seeing within the classroom and coming together to form this. So with the old IEP, it was parent-student concerns. We kind of broke them down, where this is student concerns, but I still see it up until a certain age, and depending upon kids go to school because they go, you know what I mean? It's a have to. It's not. They don't know. They're learning, but they don't. You know what I mean? They don't. They can't speak about, well, this is what what I want to do. But so I think the parent role in guiding them, and I know I used to have discussions before IEP meetings, or get over your vision, and I'm like, all right, I'll try to type it up. Having those discussions at home and formulating it, I think is a key component, especially in the younger ages. But it still drives, and along with the evolution, development of the child and the IEP, for students to become more independent in having a voice in their what their needs are as learners and what their goals are as achievers. in that role, so. It's just a key point that I know we didn't touch upon, but we know it's there,
Yeah.
you know, the
Yeah.
parental piece, so.
And it's okay that, this year I want to learn how to drive a race car. If that's what the child wants to do, that's kind of a snapshot of who they are at the moment, and I think that's okay to put
That
in
tells
there.
the story.
Right? It doesn't need to be, I want to learn my math facts, or, that's okay, right? I think
That'll come
it's a kid, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Sure.
for taking the time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I thought everybody was here for us tonight.
I am. Just for you.
All right, that brings us to item C of new business, discussion of town warrant Article 36 regarding the renaming of the Woburn Street School. Dr. Brand, can you tee this up for us?
Sure, I will. So in your packet, there's a copy of the specific page. There's an article that is moving forward to the upcoming town meeting on May 4th. And specifically, bless you, Article number 36 pertains to an effort to consider or explore whether or not the town will rename the Woburn Street School to be called the Richardson Elementary School. I won't read what's in there, but there is this as an article to bring to your attention. It seemed timely, specifically in our conversation with the chair and vice chair, to engage the school committee in talking about this article is one thing, and certainly, on the face of it, we are obviously at an interesting point in time for the school building project and exploring the future status of what the Woburn Street may or may not be, because that could be included as part of school consolidation. To my knowledge, that piece wasn't or hasn't been discussed with the select board in consideration of this, but it also seems to be an important time to, as the school committee, to talk about the future with the anticipation that at some point in the not-too-distant future, there hopefully will be a new school that will warrant a new name, especially if it's not just simply a rebuild of the Wildwood. And so some other context and history for this, and just to note, this article and this item did not come through my office or come through the school committee, so I think I'll just put that on the table. I think that's important to highlight. Going back a little bit in time, thanks to Mr. Ruggiero sort of pulling together some of the information specifically, because it wasn't a time period prior to my arrival here. Back in around 2017, there was some discussion, back and forth discussion between the then school committee, then town manager, and I believe the select board around naming a facility, specifically the Wilmington High School gym and the band room. Some of you may recall those discussions. From sort of digging up some of the information, it sounded like there was a lot of back and forth between the select board chair, the school committee chair at the time, and the then town manager, Jeff Hall. It appears that there was at one point in time perhaps a possible interest in a policy that then town manager Hall brought forward to the select board around trying to provide a frame around how to navigate these kind of situations in the naming of facilities. It seems like from a view back that there was no action was taken on the development of such a policy. There's a bylaw or bylaws in place that I think were referenced at the time, but no other further action was taken. I should also note that the school committee, you have a policy relative to naming of facilities. There's a copy of that as well in your packet. Bless you. So all of this is to say, with this article moving forward at town meeting, we don't know which direction this takes, but it seems like it's an important point in time. My suggestion would be to you as a committee to consider how you want to, start perhaps communication with the town leadership about how to move forward. Again, with the interest and hopeful possibility that we're going to be sooner than later at a point in time in which we may need to name a new school facility. It certainly is an important conversation, one that I think that there's a lot of vested interest in. And so as a school committee, obviously you have an important interest in that as well too, so.
And regarding this article on the warrant, I think that residents in town, common natural question to ask would simply be, what does the school committee think about this issue, given that it is directly connected to the name of one of our schools? So, opening up for a discussion Mr. Turner?
One point of clarification without talking about the merits of the idea. I did dig into this, and the interesting thing about the story is the family tried to give the farm to the town. The town actually said no, because then the town would have been obligated to maintain it. They ended up giving it to another organization, a historical organization, that created an appropriate deed to protect the building. The farm is now protected, and current private residents that live there have to maintain it to certain degrees. But it has never been, to this point, town property. Again, that doesn't go to the merits of whether or not we should rename. On that particular side of it, I think now would be an odd time to rename a building. But the merits of this particular choice aside, I just think it's an odd time. And so from that perspective, I'm very hesitant to rename a building today, personally.
Dr. McCaldy, you were next.
Yep. So I kind of have a few questions, either to Dr. Brand or to people on the committee, because it's more of a town-related thing. So I guess my first question would be, what are the typical reasons for a school name change? And I know we have that policy in there, but how does that work? So what if I want to name it, instead of Woburn Street, like Northeast Wilmington Elementary School?
Well, I think it's an interesting, sorry. I think it's an interesting question relative to the policy that you have. I mean, and there's that as an interesting point here too. I mean, I don't know of the history of any name changes that have happened in the district, so I can't speak to that specifically. But it's certainly an interesting place to be when you, as a school committee, have this naming of new facilities policy FF, I think, and how this policy is or is not viewed by the town, how it intersects with town bylaws. So I don't know if there's ever been, short of in recent times, those two examples that I said with the naming of the auditorium and the gym. I can't, we could certainly do some exploration of that. I don't know what that has looked like, if there's been any name changes of buildings, though.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that the policy FF is about naming new facilities.
Yes.
Which is obviously closely connected
Yep.
to naming any facility.
Right.
But changing the name of a school or any building has additional considerations that just coming up with a name for something that you've constructed new does not involve. Ms. Burns, you're next.
I think Mr. Samaha was ahead of me, but I don't mind. So my general theory or point is I'm of the belief that our public buildings, whether it be town hall, public departments, our schools, belong to the citizens of Wilmington and should take after the sites without any disrespect. There's been a lot of community members over the evolution of this community that have made positive and contributing factors to the whole of the community. But I do think that our public buildings for the all should remain just that, whether it be the North Street or whether they come up with the North Side, pre-K to something to that effect. And I don't think it should represent just one person. As Dr. Brand did allude to, I was there and a part of the naming, and the suggestion when it was brought forth for the Joanne Benton Auditorium. And I'm fortunate that I was able to actually serve with her as my superintendent for a time. And just the stories at town meeting with regards to the gymnasium and the, excuse me, sorry, it's late and I don't want to mess up, the Cushing family and the long-term contributions directly to the school, in athletics especially, and all the kids coming through. I mean, that, to me, I would be more amendable to for consideration than I think a building itself, whether it be established or whether it be a new building. I think, I want it to be equitable to all, and I just think by doing so, you save that piece or you invest in that piece by naming it, Baldwin Apple, something about Wilmington, whether it be street, side, just so that it's everyone's and not just one person's monument, or one family. But I'm not saying it as articulately as I'd like to, but that's hope I conveyed my position.
Mr. Samaha?
I guess my question, I have two questions about this. The first question is, if this were to pass at town meeting, is it like binding? Like, would we then have to make that change? And I guess my second question, which is sort of related to that, is are there financial implications of a name change that I might not be aware of?
Stationary?
I mean, besides stationary and a
Signage.
Sign? I don't know.
I don't, other than those mentioned, from a financial standpoint, I mean, there's certainly nothing with the Department of Education. From a tax, I don't know. We'd have to look into it, I think, right? I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure, other than what you just said,
Yeah.
stationary, signage, post office shouldn't cost you anything, DESI wouldn't cost you anything, but, yeah, beyond that.
In terms of the former question, or the binding question, I mean, it's an interesting question also. I think it, and I don't have the answer to that. I don't know.
Dr. McCauley?
I think to kind of follow on with that, other than donating land to the town, do we know anything else about the Richardson family? Because the reason why I bring that up is, the intent in the Warren article could be sound, but, we just don't know anything else about them, and then this passes and
Other than
things may
the,
come up.
other than the information provided, like I
Yeah.
said, there's been no other information that's been forwarded to my office about this, so.
So I can share with you, there were 2 articles I found related to this when I dug into the piece, and that's where I found the piece about the actual history of the piece of land. And there's a bit more about them. They were one of several families that lived on that farm over the course of years, but they were in town for a significant amount of time. But I can forward those links to you for your.
Yeah, it's just, something, because I read that in the policy, and, so they lived in town for a while, but do they have any contributions to the educational system in Wilmington? Are they leaders in the community, all that, kind of, in my opinion, worthy of having, maybe something named after them. That was kind of where I'm getting at.
The focus of what I found was primarily around that piece of land itself.
Yeah.
And their donation and their efforts to donate it to, it ended up not being to the town, but preserve it. So, I can send that to you.
Mr. Fenley?
I guess just for my 2 cents, the merits of the warrant notwithstanding, I struggle with supporting changing the name of the school just based on timing, right? Where the Woburn Street School could potentially be rebuilt into a new building, could be taken offline. Like, there are a number of questions with the Wildwood project that are sort of undetermined. I don't think the time to change the name of the Woburn Street School is now. So that's all.
Yeah, I'll come on top of that with the timing is one of the objections that I have to this, because the future of the building is just so unknown, that, something will be different in a few years. We don't know what, and it would be very odd to rename a school building that then is taken out of commission a few years later. Again, not getting to the merits of the family involved, of whether that's, there's an appropriate way to honor them. We don't currently name schools after people. And if that was something that we were going to start to do, I would want a little more discussion around that idea in the first place, rather than just like, well, let's just suddenly name a school differently from how we've named all the other schools. And that kind of gets to the larger objection I have here is really just about process, that I think that there needs to be a process around how these types of decisions are made. And if we decide, for example, when we come to, when we build a new school, we come down to name that school, I think we all envision a community-wide process where everyone has a chance to think about what the name of this school should be, to discuss it, to contribute ideas, and then, we'll see exactly how the ultimate, decision-making happens. But that, schools are really important to a community. And, the names of the schools is how we, think about them, how we identify them. And I think that many people would be upset to just suddenly have the name of a school changed without without an appropriate process where they really felt like that opinions were solicited, that we really thought about this carefully. Is this the kind of thing we want to do? Do we want to name schools after people? If so, this school. And so I don't think that this is the type of process that we should follow when naming or renaming school buildings. And the last point I want to make is that renaming a building is kind of a big deal, especially for the people who currently go there. For the students who go there, for the teachers and staff who work there, for the families that are part of that community. It's like the name of your school is part of how you identify yourself. You have that Woburn Street spirit, you have that Wilmington pride in that school, and that you identify yourself as, you know, a Woburn Street student. And that's something that I think should also be taken into account, that we, you know, it's like, no one's asking the students if they're interested in having their school renamed, if they want a different name, or, you know, the parents or the staff, or, you know, obviously the whole community is technically being asked because that's the point of going to town meeting. But no one's in the meantime trying to find out any of this information. It's kind of just floating out there on the warrant. So I also think that this would not go over well in the most important group, which is the actual Woburn Street community, because they have more, you know, ownership of the school as the students who actually attend it, the teachers who teach there, the parents who, you know, are part of that educational community. And for those reasons, I also think that this is not a warrant that I would support, not an article I would support. Dr. Yeah, Mr. Smaha.
I guess my question would be is if it is asked at town meeting, what is the school committee's opinion on this? I mean, should we be offering an opinion and voting on as a committee something, or are we speaking as citizens, not school committee members?
Well, at town meeting, if we were commenting like at the microphone to the item, we would be speaking as individual citizens, though obviously known as members of the school committee, but there's nothing that prevents us, if we wanted to, of passing a resolution that expresses approval or disapproval of the warrant.
I mean, there are times where somebody might ask, you know, can we have, you know, such and such opinion on this? And I think that we should, if we feel so inclined, that we should have like an opinion on it.
Mr. Chair?
I think if I were another citizen within the town, I would be curious to know that exact question. And I think it would be reasonable for us to have a statement, not necessarily something that says, you know, a positive or negative vote on it, but listing out concerns that were raised just in this conversation to say, we had these 6 or 7 things we thought of this proposal. I mean, chief among them is, you know, the topics, I mean, I think you summarized it fairly well there at the end. And list out, these are our thoughts and concerns about this. And that might be how I think we could do that. Perhaps there could be something far more strident and say, we think A or we think B as well.
Dr. Bryson?
I'm just sitting here going, I'm not sure exactly what I'm being asked to do right now. So we're just talking about how we feel about this, but technically there's not much, it's gonna go to town meeting. I mean, and so what we're deciding, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around, they're not asking us to make a comment on it necessarily, but what I'm hearing is maybe we should come up with a statement in preparation, which is fine. So I guess could that be drafted and then maybe we could look at it? But I don't know that, I'm not sure what's happening right now in this moment, because I'm kind of like, okay, this is already going. I don't know, they're not asking us our opinion. It's not gonna come to us at town meeting. It is what it is. Should we put something out there publicly so people aren't voting in support of it? I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to, what's the point of this conversation right now?
Ms. Burns?
I just don't want this to be confrontational. Our opinion hasn't been asked. We do have opinions of which we all can voice at town meeting. But this is a public building. It's not under the purview of the school departments it's a town building. That's part of this consideration. I just don't want to have this best intent to go awry I don't want it to become confrontational. Like the school board is against the Richardson family for bringing forth this warrant. I don't feel that way. My opinion is whatnot. I don't want to make it confrontational, but perhaps offline, if there's a small statement you just want to have ready, should the question be posed prior or at town meeting, then maybe that would be, I wouldn't have a problem, well, by that part, I won't have a problem with that either. But I'm just saying, that you just might, you just might want to have something in your back pocket should the question be asked prior, and if it's asked at meeting, is all.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry. I think the buildings are under the school committee.
The naming?
I'm not naming this in general, that, for instance, if a school comes out of commission,
Yeah.
the school committee has to vote to
on
give
it,
it
right.
back to the town.
Right.
So I think it comes under the school committee, because the building operates under the school
Well,
department,
the
school
budgetary
committee.
operation,
In-
the
in-
naming
in-
of the schools, or,
Yeah, I'm
Do you
just
know what I
saying that,
mean?
but you would mention that it's under the purview of the town.
As a
It's-
public building.
Yeah. and-
That's what I meant.
Okay.
not,
Dr. Bryson?
So if that's the case, then I'm back to David's comment about process, and why does this go to town meeting in the first place? So it just seems a little bit odd to me, but again, I'm just not exactly sure what we're spending our time on right at this moment.
So I guess.
So if I could get some clarification around that,
Short
I'd
of a
really
mo- short of
appreciate
a
it.
motion, what I would suggest, and I don't know if this needs a vote, needs a motion, but having a statement, and with a statement of facts and a statement of our views, without necessarily being, to your point, I don't know that any of us have said, we don't think this is a good idea at all, ever, period, but at this time and place for these other sorts of reasons, and also some of the other pieces that you mentioned, Mr. Ragsdale, to have a statement available if we're called upon, because I suspect we will be. What's the school committee think? I would be very surprised if someone doesn't stand up and ask that question. And to have some level of a statement that we're all comfortable with that says the concerns we had just raised here, I think would be appropriate. Again, it's town meeting, and to Mr. Samaha's comment, who knows what happens assuming we have to follow it if it passes, but.
If I may, I'd like to suggest, I guess, a couple of things, and whether it be from, if you'd like me to, you've asked some of you have asked some questions of which I don't have answers for. They're fair questions. Certainly, whether it be, with Mr. Ragsdale, or if you'd like the request for me to explore this further with the temporary town manager and/or the select board. I think to me, Dr. Bryson, your question, this is sort of this, again, we were not asked to weigh in on this. This is something that sort of is moving on its own. It's hard not to sort of think about, so if this were to happen in this case, and if it is binding, then what's to stop it from happening at another town meeting for another building? And so where sort of does the control lie, if you will, and what governs this? And I think that there's interest that you as a school committee would rightly have to have answers to. Forget about the possibility of a new school, but for just the existing school buildings. So, again, and to the point of thought around a statement, I'll just remind you, you obviously have another meeting before the town meeting. And so perhaps I could try, or with Mr. Ragsdale, try to find answers to some of the questions, come back to the committee with that information, and then you could, decide on how you wanted to pursue in preparation for a town meeting.
Mr. Turner?
One quick point on that. Considering the timing of that meeting and town meeting, would it be possible to have things, soon enough? I know you guys have done great things to be available on Thursday before with the packet, but if we have material questions at the meeting, having the time to spin the document again, basically in the meeting, could be a little bit awkward, to say the least. So is there a possibility that it could be even sooner than the Thursday before, so we could there's time for a cycle and a feedback loop? I don't want to put a tremendous burden or anything, but.
Well, what kind of document are we still talking about now? Like, is this just meant to be a resolution expressing approval or disapproval, or a recommendation, whether people vote for or against the article?
The way it sounded to me was more on the range of a recommendation, not necessarily a thou shalt, not thou shalt type statement.
Dr. McCauley?
Yeah, when you get the packets kind of mailed to your house and everything, there's finance committee approves or disapproves, and select board approves or recommends approval, of those. I know we haven't been asked to weigh in, but I'm wondering if we can ask to weigh in, and then if we could kind of, as a committee, maybe have a time to speak at the town meeting or weigh in on it. I think it can be simple. It's just the process. Like, the name could be fine, it's just, I think a lot of good points were raised here is that, we haven't had community feedback. We haven't looked at just the sheer logistics of it with schools changing, and then also precedents. We do this here. What's it to be later? Schools get named in this kind of manner and everything like that, and just understanding more context behind the name, and is this what we want for our community?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know some of the answers to like whether it would be appropriate for the school committee to, because of course, we've all seen on the warrant article, the finance committee recommends, approval, the planning board recommends disapproval. I don't know that there's ever been a situation for the school committee, or if that's appropriate. We would have to explore whether that made sense. My other inclination is that if we come up with some kind of statement or resolution expressing an official opinion of the committee on the article, I think it should just express essentially a recommendation to vote like yes or no on it, rather than something that tries to explain or list our reasons. School committee attends, or many members, attend town meeting and can describe reasons as needed, like, at the moment when voters are actually listening and paying attention to that. So I don't think that I would try to explain all the different reasons why we might in advance. But people might be curious to know if there is a formal position of the school committee on the article.
Yeah, so I like that idea, is the kind of, we have a formal position, and then say we can explain it at the town meeting. Would you feel comfortable in speaking for us as the committee then? Because to me, it would make sense that the chair would, speak to that if asked.
Anybody can speak at meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to represent the committee, not us as individual citizens, right?
Well, at meeting, it's a town meeting, it's not, he can, if he's charged with doing so, then, but the vote has to be before the board to charge Dave to speak on your behalf in doing that, but I think multiple voices speak loudly, because I think it shows your individuality and perspective on the topic, and why your opinion is. I think it can be just as valuable as one statement. I'm just saying you can enhance that one statement by sharing your individual positions on it at meeting, which I highly suggest. It's nice to get a variety of different perspectives as to what made up the whole of the decision too.
Sure. No, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Dr. Bryson?
Might also be helpful to bring FF back to the policy subcommittee, like, soon.
I think we meet next week.
Yeah, maybe just so that we can review it and maybe make some change, because then I think if we're supported by policy, then that makes our statement even stronger, to sort of, because right here it does say new facilities, so it doesn't really mention old facilities, and so we may want to just maybe talk through that as a subcommittee.
We may want to look into any existing bylaws
Yep.
Surrounding this, so that we can review that as well.
Okay.
All right, so it sounds as though the committee is, that there is interest in voting on a simple statement of recommendation without explanation beyond that, explanations to be provided at town meeting as needed. And I would concur with Ms. Burns that the more voices that come up to express, the reasons for the resolution that we take, the better. Even if there's perhaps one official statement of the position of the committee, but other voices are going to be more persuasive than just one. All right. I think that's something to bring back to the next meeting rather than trying to wordsmith it now. So we'll plan to bring that back to the next meeting for a vote. And it would be if you have just suggestions for draftsmanship, perhaps you can just send anything that you think it's important that it contain or not contain. Tracy, can you collect anything that people have?
send me, yes.
All right. Thank you. And that brings us to item D, which is policies for first reading. And we have 4 policies in front of us. Look like mostly small changes, for the most part, updating references and small editorial changes. Does the policy committee have anything in particular that they think we need to be aware of for any of these policies?
I don't know.
Changes on these ones are all, as you said, pretty straightforward. Bless you.
Excuse me.
All right, any questions or comments, any additional edits that the committee thinks should be made? Okay, then that will be our first read, and we will bring these back at the next meeting in the consent agenda for second read and approval.
All right.
All right, thank you. That brings us to other reports, so are there any subcommittee reports? Dr. Bryson?
I don't have one. But Jay, when is the equity committee meeting? Do we know?
Next Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
No, 2 weeks.
I mean.
2 weeks.
The next Wednesday meeting.
5:45.
On your calendar.
It's on this calendar? No, it's on the calendar. Got it. Thank you.
Very clever, scheduling it during vacation week.
Policy committee, that was next Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Town hall meets next week during
Town hall meets on
vacation week
Wednesday
too.
night, yes.
Okay.
All right, anything else for subcommittees? Okay. Correspondence?
None this evening.
All right, then notable items coming up. On April 24th is our next regular session meeting and our last meeting with Mary Jane Burns.
Thank you for the
Annual,
reminder, I almost forgot.
April 27th will be town election. May 1st is the next school building committee. The 3rd to the 4th of May is the district art show at the middle school. Highly recommend that you find your way there on either Friday or Saturday to look at the art, the amazing art that the students in this district produce, because it's truly inspiring.
Absolutely.
May 4th, not trying to deceive people, is town meeting, starting at 9 a.m. in the auditorium. May 8th will be our next regular session meeting, and Special Olympics happening on May 10th. Stephen, did we miss anything?
Doesn't look
No, I did not research this week. I apologize. Slacked on that duty.
All right.
A little reminder, please, that childcare is available during the annual town meeting from 9 to 2. The district has pushed it out with the sign up through its newsletter, but also the town pushed it out today with the same link for signing up for childcare.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. So it's a reminder that, yes, childcare will be available, but sign up soon for town meeting, provided through the district by CARE staff and student volunteers. So also very grateful to the district, to Dr. Brand and the CARE staff for making this happen and providing this service to the town of permitting childcare during town meetings so that people can attend. So thank you very much for that. And I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Burns, seconded by Dr. McCaldy. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.